welcome to the House.
Thank you for having me.
You have obviously seen these latest threats from Donald Trump. What, if anything, should Canada do differently in response?
Well, we've called on the Prime Minister and the government to allow the International Trade Committee to reconvene right now to have emergency hearings. This will be a chance for all parties to work together on a plan to get back to the table, get a deal done that will end the tariffs, allow Canadians unfettered access again to the American market, get rid of the softwood tariffs, the Buy America rules, the tariffs that have since come in under President Trump, and to as well provide the Americans assurance that we're going to rebuild our military in order to do our part in continental security. I think that is the best way forward in order to get a deal and bring some certainty to the Canadian economy and to our workers.
Your party has suggested that this move to have the committee meet is a way to show support to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, though, does already get a lot of advice when it comes to these negotiations. Obviously, he has his team, the ambassador, cabinet, the premiers of all political stripes, his Canada-US Council. What do you think this would add that he's not already getting?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that he be transparent and demonstrate he has a plan. Originally, he said that he would have a deal at the G7, and then it became a deal by the 21st of July, and now we see it's delayed again to August the 1st. And we want to know what the plan is to put an end to the tariff chaos. Secondly, I think it would allow us to redouble our pressure on the government to reverse the disastrous liberal economic policies that have made us so hopelessly reliant on the Americans. For example, to pressure the full repeal of C-69, the anti-pipeline and anti-energy law, the tanker ban, the energy cap, the industrial carbon tax, the plastics ban. All these things are really beating our economy to the ground and making us more dependent on the Americans. We need is a plan to bring home production and paychecks to this country, put Canada first. And that's one of the things that we think we could put on the table in immediate hearings on international trade at the committee.
You recently suggested that by cancelling the digital services tax, this was about 2 weeks ago, Mark Carney was putting his elbows down. Do you believe that Canada should have kept that tax in place?
I think the tax is a bad idea. I would have used it as a bargaining chip to get concessions in return.
Well, I should say, so we don't know, right?
For example,
because the negotiations aren't public, we don't know whether Canada got anything back, right?
We don't know, but it tends to be a mistake to give the concession before you get one in return. Now, I agree with getting rid of the tax. It was a disastrous tax that would have made life more expensive for Canadians. But we have to negotiate to get an end to the softwood tariffs that came in under Obama, Biden, and now Trump, and that are hammering our forestry sector. We need an end to the Buy America policies that are killing construction jobs in Canada, an exemption that Mr. Harper got when he was Prime Minister. So far, Prime Minister Carney has not received any concessions. He hasn't made any headway, and I don't blame him entirely for that. Obviously, he's dealing with unfair treatment by the Americans, but we want to see some wins for Canada, and we have suggestions on how to get those wins, because really we have to put our country first, and that's what we're asking for.
I mean, you say he hasn't made any headway, and I would again say that may or may not prove to be the case because so much of this is happening away from the public eye. But I want to go back to what Donald Trump has just said.
If I could, on that point, just say, and I hope he does, I hope that you're right. I hope that there are some big wins for Canada. And I told Prime Minister Carney in our several conversations that Conservatives stand ready to help in any way we can to reach out to lawmakers on the American side of the border, to offer suggestions and present a united Canadian front, because we really do hope that we get a good deal for all Canadians.
Are you doing that? Has he taken you up on that, or have you done that proactively?
So far, I have talked to numerous lawmakers and advocated for the Canadian position, but we haven't formally engaged in traveling to the U.S. at this point. But I told the Prime Minister that we as Canadian Conservatives, we put our country first, and we're prepared to work with anybody from any party to get a good deal for Canada.
Want to drop a few names for us, Mr. Poilievre? Who have you been speaking to?
Well, I spoke to Pete Sessions. He's a congressman from Texas. Spoke to number of other congressmen who were in town for the Calgary Stampede in passing. We stand ready to do more if the Prime Minister wants us to help engage in the diplomatic process. We're happy to do it. One great way to do that is let's pull back the International Trade Committee and work together on getting the message out.
So I want to continue with this latest message from President Trump. He has said that Canada will face greater tariffs if we try to retaliate against a higher level of tariffs that he is proposing. Should those threats stop Canada from retaliation? Do we need to heed that warning?
I think we should try to get the deal done on the deadline. And that way we don't have to worry about tariffs that hurt both of our countries. I'm at a company right now in Stettler, Alberta, that has been said that they're paying the import tariffs that Canada is charging on some of the materials they put into their products. And we want to make sure that whatever tariffs that we counter with against the Americans do maximum impact on the American side of the border, minimal impact on the Canadian side. We should only be targeting things that we can make ourselves, that we can get from other countries, or that we don't ultimately need, so that we minimize the economic pain that Canadians pay for an act that, frankly, is not the fault of our people or our country.
You mentioned the deadline, and you talked about the fact that it has changed a few times. But fundamentally, Mark Carney said the purpose of this deadline is deadlines focus the mind. Was the deadline a good idea, sir, or did that put Canada on the back foot?
Well, the challenge with a unilateral self-imposed deadline is it tells the counterparty that they have you on a clock, and a clock that only applies to you. It's like if we're playing chess and on your side it's speed chess, and you have a clock on you have to watch while you're making your move, and I don't. Then I have a lot more ability to sit back and watch the board while you're watching the clock. And so I personally think it would have been better not to show that up front to the Americans, because we know that President Trump will try to take advantage of it. That said, we do think that we do need to work to get this done as quickly as possible, because every passing day brings uncertainty and paralysis.
I just want to ask you one more thing about this trade situation. We can all see, and this is not necessarily new, but the president is quite hung up on Canada's supply management system. If that is ultimately where the deal hinges, if that's what's standing in the way of a deal, do you believe that Canada should be willing to give a little bit to allow Americans to sell more of their products here?
Well, what I would say to to our American friends is, are you willing to get rid of the tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of farm subsidies that the American taxpayer gives producers on their side of the border, and that ultimately present a disadvantage to our farmers? You know, our farmers have to compete with massive multi-billion-dollar subsidies on the American side that we don't get here. And so I do find it passing strange that the U.S. government would say that our farmers are somehow getting an unfair advantage. But I also don't think we should be making, I don't think we should be making, these kinds of proactive, unilateral concessions, because that's not how you do a negotiation.
But is there any wiggle room, is what I want to understand from your point of view, because it's a very politically charged issue in Canada.
But there already has been wiggling. The last USMCA allowed for more market access by the Americans. I'm not even sure if the American producers are using the market access that Prime Minister Trudeau sacrificed. There's also been new penalties on Canadian exports of dairy in the prior USMCA. So I think that Canada has the Liberal government has made big concessions on this already. And the problem is they're not getting anything in return. Well,
I suppose the question of how big they are, you point to that in your answer, right? If the Americans aren't using them, perhaps the concessions ultimately weren't all that big. I guess we'll see where this conversation goes. I do want to ask you, though, before we let you go, we're reaching you in Alberta. You're there campaigning for the by-election in Battle River, Crowfoot.
It's a great place to be, back on the prairies.
Indeed. Well, listen, it does appear that we are heading towards a referendum on Alberta separation. When you are speaking to folks on the ground in the riding that you hope to win, are you telling them that they should remain part of Canada regardless of who is governing? I know you want to make the case for a conservative government, but that referendum is likely to come sooner rather than later. Would you say to them they should stay even with Mark Carney in power?
They should stay in Canada.
Yes. Are you
that,
actively advocating
yeah,
for
if you're asking me, absolutely. I'm advocating for a united Canada. And I say that on the doorstep. I say it when I'm in town halls. I say it every time it comes up. I said it at the Calgary Stampede. So I'm not being wishy-washy about this. I'm a Canadian. I'm a Canadian patriot. I'm proud that I grew up in southern Alberta, in Calgary. And I'm a very proud born and bred Albertan. Canada is my country. Canada is the country that the people in Battle River Crowfoot call home. If you look around this community, the communities here, you will see the Canadian flag everywhere. It's on front lawns, it's on doorsteps, it's on people have Canadian flags on their pickup trucks. This is a very patriotic place, and I have with no hesitation whatsoever saying that Alberta should be part of Canada. And I should also say, though, the days of telling Alberta to pay up and shut up, to just send more and more money to Ottawa, while the Liberal government there blocks pipelines, destroys the energy sector, disrespects farmers, harms the economy, those days are over. We need to respect what Alberta is contributing. We need pipelines built. We need to repeal C-69, the anti-pipeline law, get rid of the tanker ban, the energy cap, the industrial carbon tax. We need to respect licensed firearms owners and farmers. Those are all things that can happen within a united Canada, and I pledge to be both a champion for fairness for Alberta and a united Canada for our entire country.
And indeed, many of those issues did come up in the last election, and you're in this by-election because you lost the Ottawa riding that you held for 2 decades. If you couldn't win your own riding, sir, why should people in Alberta and across the country give you a second chance?
Well, listen, the reality is we got 8.3 million votes across the country, at 2.5 million more than we had in the prior election. We added 25 seats. We got the largest share of vote of a Conservative Party has had since 1988. So the answer is that the voice that I bring represents those 8 million plus people who believed in my message of fighting inflation, of getting affordable homes built, of locking up criminals, defeating drugs, unleashing our resources. Those are the messages, and those things mattered to those people. And I think that if you look at how the debate has changed in Canada as a result of the arguments and the causes that I've taken on, that voice has been very important to countless people, and it's a voice I want to amplify.
Then how do you make sense of the 4,513 votes that you lost by in your riding?
Well, the reality is it's a riding that is over. It was very simple. I was very clear that we would be cutting the federal bureaucracy if I was Prime Minister. And it was an Ottawa riding with a lot of federal public servants who disagreed with that approach. And they ran a very aggressive campaign, particularly the public sector unions did, to defeat me on that basis. Now, some people might say, well, it wasn't the best idea to run on a smaller federal public service when you're an Ottawa MP, but I had an entire country to represent, and I had to be honest with people. Like, I guess I could have done what the Liberals did, which is hide their plans, but I didn't do that. I said very clearly, we're going to have to eliminate federal public service jobs. That's the only way you bring down taxes and deficits. And I was honest about that, and the people in that particular constituency voted accordingly.
Okay. Mr. Poilievre, you have been generous with your time in the middle of this by-election. I appreciate it, and I hope you'll come back on the program. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the invite. All the very best.
You too.